Nice to be back with you again. Today, we're going to talk about scheduling in PCS. There's a lot to discuss, so we're just going to dive right in. First and foremost, we're going to cover the basics of scheduling, talk a little bit about scheduling facility types. You're going to hear me say that word a lot through this presentation. So describe what they are, what they do, why they're important. We'll walk through all of the different configurable scheduling parameters that are going to influence your due dates. Talk about the practicality of how your schedules and your delinquent dates overlap. And then to wrap it all up, we'll dig into some pretty deep customization options that we have, a different variety of ways to configure your schedules and some best practices to do it efficiently. So first and foremost, let's talk about the basics. The scheduling engine of PCS is a common element across the whole platform. So any of the modules that you're using are going to have scheduling totally out of the box, except for indirect survey, because the schedules aren't as regimented for ECDA type inspections. But we take the schedules and we bake in the standard regulations for every different type of facility, right? So test points are annual by default, rectifiers and critical bonds are bi-monthly, atmospherics are on a 3-year cycle, and so forth. So just by adding test points to the test points tab and rectifiers to the rectifiers tab, PCS is able to properly schedule your inspections, assuming they're being measured against the standard requirements. It's as easy as that. In this screenshot that you see on this slide, though, the default for atmospherics is 3 years. And with my configurations, every time I add an atmospheric test location, it's going to inherit settings from the main template. We call these main templates scheduling facility types. Every facility in PCS is always going to inherit schedule settings from their corresponding template from the highest level down. And we're going to talk about that and how to manipulate it further into the presentation. But just know that by correctly categorizing your facilities, that's going to directly impact your schedules, which directly impact your delinquent dates. So let's talk for a minute about the difference just between schedules and delinquencies. Schedules are meant to help you optimize the time of year that you should be going out to gather inspections, right? So I need to go read these locations in April so that I'm not bunching everything up towards the end of the year. You might do this already, right? I know that I always go to these locations in this month, and that's why I've done it for 10 years. And that's great. You can continue to do that. But if you configure PCS settings to align with those schedules, then you can have an additional level of guardrails that help keep you on track. Hey, you might have missed these 2 or 3 things from those assets that were to be read in April. You need to go back to get them before you hit your delinquent date, right? Okay, so schedules optimize when you should do things. Delinquencies are your drop dead compliance due dates. The schedule configurations are part of the metadata that we use to calculate your delinquent dates. So it's super important that your scheduling facility types are configured correctly, or you might mistakenly see some facilities showing as delinquent when they're actually not delinquent. Digging a little bit deeper into scheduling, we have 3 different methods for how due dates, these are specifically scheduling due dates, are calculated, not delinquent due dates. Delinquent due dates are always based on your last inspection. But scheduling due dates, to optimize when you should go do things, we have 3 different methods: targets, last survey, and then X years, Y%. Targets are pretty straightforward. They let you go in and you just say, I'm going to go do this group of assets in this month and year. If it's a multi-year inspection like atmospherics, you might do it in year 1, year 2, or year 3, right? But ultimately, it lets you granularly go in and peanut butter spread, your assets over months so that you can optimize your work and you're not, doing everything in 1 month. Takes a little bit longer to set that up because you have to go in and manually define which assets are due in which months. But it's worth it because it helps keep your workload more balanced. Last survey is really commonly used, and the reason it's commonly used is because it's super easy to set up. All this does is it's a method that calculates your schedule dates based on your last inspection, and then it incorporates your things like your months between survey, right? Your time between your inspections. And that also considers things like calendar violations and in your considerations, right? So it doesn't just say, well, my last inspection was, this month, therefore I don't have to have one until next year. It's going to incorporate, still going to incorporate the number of inspections per year. The reason people use this a lot is because it's easy. It's really easy to set up. You just go into, edit schedule settings, you find your scheduling facility type, you click the due date calculation method that you can see on the screen, and you click last survey and you're off to the races. But the challenge with using last survey is that it doesn't keep you optimized, right? As if you are continually taking your inspections in your grace period, which we'll talk about on the next slide, then your annual inspections are sliding down every year, right? If you take it 1 month late every single year, eventually all of your inspections are going to be bunched up in December because you have to have that inspection in a calendar year, right? And so it doesn't pull those inspections and keep them in the month that they should be taken. So workload optimization doesn't really do that, but it gives you a good indication really quickly of when you should go do these things to maintain your compliance. The last option here, X years, Y%, is mostly related to isolated services. Commonly, this is a 10-year survey, and I'm going to sample 10% of my assets each year, random sampling, and then after 10 years, I will have them all inspected. And you can change the years and change the percentages. For example, if you wanted to do 11%, you could finish a year early, or you can shrink it down, to fewer years or more years. Again, not really commonly used, mostly used for isolated services, gas distribution environments, but the option is there if you need to use it for those types of assets. Okay, let's talk a little bit about inspection timing. Every single scheduling facility type gives you the ability to granularly control the time between your surveys, the grace period, as well as the required number of inspections per year. So all of these settings translate into your whole 12 months, not to exceed 15, or the calendar year, whichever comes first, right? That's what we bake into delinquencies. And schedules and delinquencies are chained together, right? So these settings are tied directly to your delinquent dates. And you can configure them such that they meet your O&M. So time between surveys is pretty simple. It just determines how long between inspections you have. And it's configured either based on months or based on years. You can control which. So, if we take an example, just so you have a test point, the standard annual configuration, 12 months would mean I'm going to capture one inspection every 12 months, every year, 1 year. Grace periods define how long after your due date you have to take your inspection before it becomes delinquent, like your drop dead compliance due date, right? So your grace period extends the time, if your grace period were to extend the time into the next calendar year, then, since you still have to have an inspection each calendar year, we have another setting that lets you say, how many required inspections per calendar year you need. That's the last column here. And so that's the, incorporates the calendar year portion of the regulation, and the code of PCS, the scheduling engine itself, takes care of all the logic. So you come in and put in how many months, what are your grace periods, how many inspections you need per year, and the code in PCS does the whole not to exceed 15 months or whichever comes first. You don't have to think about that at all. Even if you don't use scheduling to optimize when you should do your inspections, these settings are still going to apply to delinquent dates. So make sure that you're coming in and aligning these with your O&M so that your delinquent dates are accurate. So where does it overlap, right? And how do schedules differ from delinquencies? Delinquent dates, they do come straight from your schedule settings. Every single facility in PCS is always going to have scheduling facility type so that we can determine the delinquent date. But delinquent dates don't focus primarily on if you're doing things when you're supposed to do them. They only focus on that drop dead compliance due date. They're taking into account your last inspection and then factoring in all of the settings we talked about to determine the delinquent date. So beyond the items that we've covered, your time between surveys, your grace period, your number of inspections per year, delinquent dates are also taking into account some additional fields. Installation date, the surveyed status of your last inspection, and facility active. So installation date's pretty self-explanatory. It's an optional field that lets you determine, or lets you log rather, when a particular facility was installed in the field. We'll talk about how that impacts delinquencies here in just a second. The second thing that delinquencies are kind of extending beyond your schedule settings is looking at surveyed status. So this is the way we're actually determining if your previous inspections actually count as being complete or not in PCS. And y'all are all really familiar with this concept if you use FDC, because we have that new tri-status multi-color coding option on the map and the site list and the facility pages, where green means surveyed. It's got the green box around the facility type with a check. Blue means visited, but it's not completed. So you went there, you gathered something, but you didn't do everything that you need to consider that particular inspection complete. And then white means you haven't visited it yet, right? In order for inspections to count towards meeting your scheduling requirements, in turn meeting your delinquency requirements, they have to be considered surveyed. You have to do all the things that you need to do. And so beyond it being surveyed, there are a bunch of configurations, a string of configurations that dovetail really deeply into that surveyed status. And I'm not going to get into a ton of detail about that because it can be its own presentation in and of itself. But just know that a PCS admin can choose at the field level which fields are counting towards that surveyed status. So they can choose if they're required or not, right? And you can turn them on and you can turn them off, and it applies to everyone. A PCS admin can also control if any of those fields count towards meeting your surveyed status, or if you need every single one of those fields on an inspection in order to be considered surveyed. We have a ton of literature about that too on our website. Y'all can check that out on our support site. But keep in mind, surveyed applies to delinquencies. The last thing is facility active. Pretty straightforward. You only want to be measuring currently active facilities against delinquencies. You don't want to have to, show a report looking like you missed a bunch of inspections when in actuality you've abandoned some sites, right? So that make sure that you're updating your facility active. All of these settings, right? The schedule settings, installation date, inspection date, surveyed status, facility active are used to determine your delinquent status. And that manifests itself in a field called delinquent notes from the delinquency report. There's three kind of classifications for delinquencies that we have. The first one is called an interval violation. It means that you went over your 15 months, right? 12 months not to exceed 15 months. If you go to that 16th month and take an inspection, then you were out of compliance for a month. Calendar violation means you went over the calendar year, right? You have to have one inspection per year. So if you don't take it in a year, then that's a calendar violation. And then whichever comes first, right? 15 months or the calendar year, whichever comes first. So the code is going to take care of that for you. You don't have to think about it. The data is just going to tell you based on whichever of those is going to come first. And the last one is related to installation date. So you might see on your delinquency reports, no last inspection. All that means probably is that the facility is newly added to PCS, and the delinquent report doesn't know how to treat it because delinquent dates are based on last inspections, right? We have our scheduling parameters. We understand the time between survey, the grace period, number of inspections per year, but we don't have a baseline of when we should start calculating that. And so if you see no last inspection, probably means you just need to go in and put in the installation date, which sets the timer, kind of like pseudo treats it like a previous inspection. And then it'll understand how to calculate your delinquent dates. Okay, so the basics of scheduling, the basics of the delinquencies. Now let's get a little crazy here and talk about what if your assets don't follow standard regulations? What sort of customization options do you have? This is super common because we are audited not against standard regulations, we're audited against our O&M, right? And so PCS is designed to match your O&M. There's some really important concepts to think about when you're talking about customizing your scheduling. The first is that all of the scheduling changes start at the global level and they cascade down to every single facility. So we call this concept inheritance. And it's a really important concept because manipulating inheritance is how you can quickly and efficiently make large scale scheduling changes. So always remember, settings are applied from the top down, right? Now, if you have cases where you need to deviate from that global setting, then what you're going to do is put in an override. Overrides are done at lower levels and they stop that inheritance from going any further. So the override or the inheritance goes down the override, and then the override sets the new global setting for any downstream assets from that. And that's the basic concept that you're going to use to manipulate your schedules. You can do this actually in a variety of different ways. We can do this through hierarchy settings. We can do it through building custom scheduling facility types with auto select expressions, which sounds really complex, but it's really not that complex. And y'all are actually also familiar with that too. Think about, I'll give you two examples. On this slide, I'll give you one related to atmospherics, specific to building custom scheduling facility types. Atmospherics by default are to be read every 3 years, right? But that's typically for onshore atmospherics. Offshore atmospherics typically are read every year. And so you can build in PCS custom scheduling facility types, one for your onshore atmospherics, one for your offshore atmospherics with different months between survey, and then use properties in PCS for PCS to literally understand programmatically what, if it's onshore or offshore, right? How many months between survey do I have, which impacts your delinquent dates. So how do you do all this? The most basic way is just by using your hierarchy. So, you can see from the far left-hand side, your standard hierarchy. At the very, very top, American Innovations has that down arrow. And the down arrow means that there is an override that's in place at a lower level. And if you follow it down to the second highlighted box, transmission systems, you can see that transmission systems is emboldened. When a hierarchy element is emboldened in the hierarchy level override screen, what that means is there's an override in place at that level. And you can see on the right-hand side in the table that has this different scheduling facility types, when those settings are emboldened, you can clearly see what the override is that's actually in place. So if my hierarchy is organized in a way that allows me to delineate my assets, I can very easily go in and just pick a hierarchy level and choose how I want to manipulate my time between surveys, my grace period, my early survey limit, number of calendar years per inspection, all of those things, right? It's the exact same settings that are applied at the global level You're just changing where that global setting applies and then letting it cascade down downstream to all of the assets that are within that transmission systems folder. And this can be done at any hierarchy level, even all the way down to the individual facility level. But I really recommend that you don't do it at the facility level because the global settings stop at overrides, right? And if you need to make global changes, including your overrides, then you essentially have to undo all of the overrides in order for those changes to take effect. So the lower you put your overrides, the more work you have to do to undo them, right? So that's where inheritance comes into play. Always, always, always try to find the highest level to set these schedule setting overrides so that if you need to make changes, it's easy to make those changes. Okay, the next kind of override is kind of, I like this one more. It's more programmatic. It happens more automatically rather than manually choosing your different hierarchy levels. It's using auto select expressions. And so the way this works is you're actually familiar with this concept actually already. If you look at the top box, we're all familiar with critical bonds and non-critical bonds. Both of those types of facilities in PCS are foreign bonds, right? And so PCS looks at the critical bond field, which is a checkbox field, to see if it's checked or not. If it's checked, it's critical, and my time between surveys is 2 months. If it's not checked, it's annual, and I'm gonna read my bond every 12 months. And that, again, picks up with delinquencies. So that already happens today, right? And y'all can go in and build your own custom scheduling facility types if you had different use cases where you have the same PCS asset that has different scheduling facility types, right? Onshore atmospherics versus offshore atmospherics. They're all atmospherics, but they have different months between survey. And so you can use these scheduling facility types with an auto select expression, which is just a filter. It's just looking at a field in PCS as a filter and let the system determine for you what your months between survey are. Okay, last best practices. Set your hierarchy overrides sparingly, right? Global settings and inheritance are applied from the top down. The more overrides you have at lower levels, if you need to make changes, the longer it's going to take to undo those overrides. Use auto select expressions maximally. Let the system, handle all of the nuance rather than you manually going through and defining things yourself. Figure out a way to come up with a filter, to draw lines between those assets. And then lastly, turn off unused scheduling facility types. So in this table here, we have 3 scheduling facility types. They're all related to bonds, right? The bottom 2 options, periodic bond, critical, annual bond, non-critical, cover every case that my bond could be. It's either critical or non-critical, right? Bi-monthly or annual. Well, out of the box, there's a 3rd type for annual bonds. I don't need it because it's already covered by my non-critical bonds. And so you just want to change that selected method from yes to no so that the system doesn't try to schedule an additional annual inspection. Okay, a lot of content. That's it. Thank you all so much for attending.